1942, Viktor Frankl, Auschwitz concentration camp, Nazi Germany. Over the next 3 years, he spends time in Auschwitz and Dachau, loses his wife, his children, his parents, his siblings. He alone is left out of his family system. Comes to this declaration: everything can be taken from someone except that last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. That's awesome. I would not agree with everything he believed philosophically. He went on and became a philosopher. Actually was at SMU for a while. But I do believe that he's right, that in any given set of circumstances, that last freedom that you have is how you choose to approach that. Still read to us, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth. Near the end of that, we sort of have this mindset. You've heard that it was said to love your neighbor, but I tell you to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I don't think I can pray for the people that kill Marlene, take my daughters and my parents and my siblings. I think Jesus is asking a little much there. But maybe I could, if it was more about him than it was about me, if it was more about God than it was about how I felt about God. Time is filled with swift transition. Naught of earth unmoved can stand. You sang the words. Whom shall I fear? You sang the words. Whom shall I fear? About 2,450 years before Viktor Frankl was in Nazi German concentration camps, the Babylonians overran the city of Jerusalem. And in 597, they took a mass exodus away from the people. They marched them 700 miles into captivity. 7 years before that, about 7 years before that, they had been to Jerusalem and picked up the best looking, smartest young people there were. Now, I don't know about y'all, but if they're going to come in here and capture some of us graybeards need to say, take us, we want to go. They took the very best of the youth group. They checked their GPA, they checked their weight and their measurements, and they said, you guys, come with us. We're going to take you 700 miles away. We're going to change everything about your world. We're going to change everything. As a matter of fact, we're going to shift your focus entirely. We're going to send you to university. We're going to let you go to school for 3 years, to the best schools in the world. It's a little different than a concentration camp. It's a little different. That's where Daniel and Hananiah and Mishael and Azariah find themselves when they travel from Jerusalem to Babylon. In the university, being trained. But I want you to understand that, first of all, God has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you, so that we may confidently say, the Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid. What will man do to me? The Lord is my helper. What's man going to do to me? Daniel seems to have that sort of confidence and faith. Now, where he is in the life of Jeremiah, I'm not sure. Jeremiah was saying, hey, I could have used Daniel's voice down here in Jerusalem. And God says, no, I've got somewhere else for him to be. I need for Daniel to go to Babylon. Here's how Daniel 1 starts. God shifts the action. He moves the scene. He takes us from the temple to Babylon. You ever wonder who moved my temple? Maybe you've heard the little book, Who Moved My Cheese? I'm upset things are not the way they were. Something's changed in my life. Who moved my temple? Daniel has to say. And God says, let me tell you, Daniel, I'm the one that moved it. Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God. I'm going to take my stuff from my temple and go put it in Marduk's temple in Babylon. God has left the building. Now, the temple's going to stand another 18 years, but God has left the building. He looks at Israel and says, I'm out of here. I'm going to captivity with Daniel. And they're going to take my stuff, and I'm going there with them. God's world begins to shift and change because He's changing it. But notice what it says in verse 3. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, the king of his officials, to bring in some of the sons of Israel, including some of the royal family and of the nobles, youths in whom was no defect, who were good-looking, showing intelligence in every branch of wisdom, endowed with understanding and discerning knowledge, and who had ability for serving in the king's court. And he ordered him to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. I'm going to give you 3 years, and I want you to learn to read and write and speak Chaldean. I'm going to give you this education. The best and brightest are taken. They're given an education. How do you deal with the world and those circumstances? What would you do if someone moved your temple and you found out that it's God who's done the work? Here's what Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do. Oh, they get their names changed first. Here we find in verse 5, the king appointed for them a daily ration from the king's choice food and from the wine which he drank, and appointed them that they be educated 3 years, at the end of which they were to enter the king's personal service. Now among them from the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Then the commander of the officials assigned them new names, and to Daniel he named Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. Verse 8, Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food. There's a principle that starts to come in here for all of us. When we look at our slides that say in the world but not of it, we are in it and not of it this year. Daniel is taken to a new world and he has said, I want you to be in it but not of it. Daniel looks at the world around him and says, we're not going to eat that stuff. We're not going to take that defiled food into us. We're going to honor God. You see, the challenge was, can I live in but not of the new world? If anything preaches in postmodernity, it's the book of Daniel. If anything preaches in our year and world right now, it is how can we be part of this world but not be consumed by this world? How can we be in it but not of it? Have an impact and make a difference. You can't make a difference if you eat their food. No, God declared all things clean. It's not about dietary restrictions now. What he's saying is you can't change the world if you become like the world. If you become the Canaanites of the world, if you become the Babylonians of the world, you can't change the world if that's the way you're living. It'll be an impossibility. But it also doesn't help any for you to be walled off in this little place where you don't make a difference to anyone. He didn't tell us to come up on the hill and build ourselves a nice church building and keep everybody out so we wouldn't have to change and we wouldn't have to embrace everyone. He says, no, I put you in the world, but not of the world. And I want you to go show the world, and I appreciated Byron's permissiveness section of his prayer, that the world says, you have a loving God who permits us to do whatever we want. And we say, we have a God that loves you so much, He'll tell you what to do. That's how much He loves you. He loves you too much to let you think that your way is in yourself. I know, O Lord, that a man's way is not in himself, neither is it in a man who walks to direct his own steps. Jeremiah 10:23 says, we have a God that loves us so much that He will actually give us commands and give us blessings. We live in a world also of permissive parents. They say, well, I don't want to break the spirit of my 2-year-old. Well, you better break something or they're going to break everything, right? I mean, it's going to get down to that point. Something's got to give. I don't want to break. I understand. We don't want to abuse anyone. God never intended that, but it's also abuse to let a child think they run the house. To force a 2-year-old to be in charge of your house is abuse. And some of you are doing that, and you can't. You've got to step in and say, wait, God gave me the role of parent. And now God is showing Judah, I have the role of parent. I love you enough to spank you. I'm going to send you into captivity, but I'm going there ahead of you, and I'm actually going to send some folks ahead of you. I'm going to send at least Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I'm going to send them ahead of you, and they're going to sort of prep the place for you. You see, 8 years before He brings Jerusalem, the population mass, to Babylon, He's already sent Daniel. For 3 years, Daniel goes to school, learns all the education of the system. We'll study a little more of that in a moment. VBS will be full of that. But then He's going to say, I'm getting things ready for you. I want you to show that you can live in this world but not of it. And I want you to show the Babylonians what it means to live in relationship with me in the midst of their world. Well, that's a difficult thing. That's what God invites all of you to do when you go back to school this year. He invites you to go show your world at school what it means to live with God in the midst of your school environment. When you go to work, He said, what does it look like if I'm at my job, but I'm a Christian? He's given you opportunity to live with God at work. And you're going to have to take that opportunity up to make a difference in our world. That's letting your light shine. In a dark and perverted, twisted world, you're letting your light shine. Daniel, I want you to go let your light shine. And Daniel says, you know how I'm going to do that? I'm going to watch what I eat. Well, that's a head scratcher. What spiritual disciplines are you going to employ to show your world that you're in relationship with God? Daniel says, I'm going to choose food. It's the first thing that came up on the plate. No pun intended. First thing that comes up is food. Well, look what happens. Daniel chapter 1, verse 9. Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. The commander of the officials said to Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has appointed your food and your drink. For why should he see your faces looking more haggard than the youths who are your own age? Then you would make me forfeit my head to the king. You talk about stewardship. They said, here's some guys, we want you to raise them up. They better not come back looking worse than they started. If they don't look as good as when they started, we're taking your head off. You'd take care of those people, wouldn't you? But Daniel, verse 11, said to the overseer, whom the commander of the officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given some vegetables to eat and some water to drink. Then let our appearance be observed in your presence and the appearance of the youths who are eating the king's choice food, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, their appearance seemed better, and they were fatter than all the youths who had been eating the king's choice food. So the overseer continued to withhold their choice food and the wine which they were to drink, and kept giving them vegetables. This is that case for eating your vegetables, right? This is where Popeye comes from. Have a little spinach. It's good for you. He says, no, we're choosing to honor God in our life in the midst of a foreign world. We're going to honor God by what we put in our bodies. Does that come up today? You're going to honor God by what you put in your bodies. They're going to legalize marijuana. You can have it or not have it. They've already legalized alcohol. You can have it or not have it. The question is, are you going to honor God by what you put in your bodies? By the way, sugar's never been illegal, but it's oftentimes immoral. Ugh. You'd hate to get rid of sugar, wouldn't you? Oh, you get that difficult problem. Am I going to honor God by the way I live in the midst of a world so that it makes a difference to the world around me? Everybody can see something. Daniel draws the line in the sand and says, this is where I'm going to go and I won't go any further. And I'm going to have a good attitude about it. In the midst of this circumstance, I'm going to have a good attitude, but I'm not going to eat that food. And I'm not going to rebel against my superiors. I'm going to say, give us a test. Just try us. If things aren't better, let us know. And we look better than the rest of them. Well, in verse 17, as for these 4 youths, God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of literature and wisdom. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. You see the last point, God is with us even when everything changes. Because Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego chose God, God was with them. And they were successful. Some of you may be going off to college. If you choose against God, you're going to bear consequences for that. If you choose God, things may not go easily for you, but the attitude that you have as things you struggle with come up is going to be radically different when you've chosen God's way. Well, you may still have some struggles at school. God didn't say you'd be instantly smarter, but you can make a D in peace because you're with God, right? You're doing the most important thing. Wait a minute, I'm working with God, but I'm at peace. When you go to a new school, some of you going to high school, some of you going into middle school. My oldest grandson is moving to middle school this year. We're worried about middle school environment for my oldest grandson. We had lunch with Mr. Kelly this week, superintendent here in Springtown, if you're not familiar with Mike. He bought our lunch for all the preachers in town. He says, we've got a message we're going to try to get out this year. We need to get it started in the churches. Be a buddy, not a bully. We've got an anti-bullying campaign that we're going to ask you to help us promote. He hasn't sent me anything yet, so I'm doing it impromptu, but he will. And it'll also be part of our back-to-school prayer night that we're going to have. But it's tough to go into a world where you're going to be put upon and things are not easy and you might be bullied. And you're going to have to say, no, I'm going to be a friend. Daniel wasn't alone. He has Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're in this together with God. And they make a choice for God. No, we're not going to act like the rest of the world. You don't have to go to school and act like the rest of the world. You can go to school and act like God. Now that may make you look odd, but you can go to school and act like God. You can do it. You can go to work and act like God. That may make you look odd. But you can go to work and act like God. Look what he says now in verse 18. Then at the end of the days, which the king had specified for presenting them, the commander of the officials presented them before Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and out of them all, not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered into the king's personal service. As for every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king consulted them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and conjurers who were in all of his realm. And Daniel continued until the first year of Cyrus the king. 10 times better in their wisdom matters. And sharper, they had the best GPA in the university. And they came out to work in the court system with the king as interpreters and as linguists. Hey, these guys know Hebrew, they know Aramaic, they know Chaldean. We can really use them. Well, I tell you, if I could go back to high school, I'd learn Spanish. I guarantee you, it's the first language I would learn. And I would make sure that I could speak it well. I can't even say hablo español. I don't know. What do? We need to have that language, that diversity of being able to say, no, I'm useful to God in this place and at this time, and God has orchestrated the events so that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are excelling beyond their peers. I believe God will help you excel when you choose to be His person in the midst of a world, but not of it. That you'll come to the top. When we go around to your schools and drop your name to your teachers. Oh, that's one of my favorite kids in class. Well, why is that? They tell the truth. What? I never thought that would be an anomaly. But that's an anomaly. Our daughter's moving from Dodge City to San Antonio, city librarian. They had to actually have official transcripts from her universities before they would hire her in San Antonio because so many people are lying about their degrees. Can you imagine that? I couldn't believe it. I mean, they won't take a copy? No, they've got to have an official transcript from the school. Because in San Antonio, so many people are lying about their education, getting a job, that they can't trust the people they're hiring. Just go to school and tell the truth. You'll probably be okay. Get a job and tell the truth. You'll probably be boss in 5 years. It's not that hard. He's giving us some ways that we can live, and it starts with simply being who God says you need to be in the midst of the world that you live in. Just tell the truth. Have some integrity. Stand up for the one that's being bullied, and be a friend to those around you. And be a friend to those that persecute you. Well, here's your take home this morning. How do you react when your whole world changed? How do you react? You see, Daniel doesn't choose to react. Daniel chooses to be proactive. I don't want you to go into school wondering how you're going to act, what you're going to do. I want you to go into school being proactive. You decide beforehand, I'm going to go be God's ambassador in this environment. And you've already predetermined how you're going to act, how you're going to treat the people with the locker next to you, and how you're going to deal with the teachers, and how you're going to deal with the bus driver. You've already predetermined that. You're not reactive, you're proactive. Daniel says, I'm going to be proactive. I'm not going to eat that food. What if they had said, if you don't eat it, we'll kill you? Well, it's over. I don't think Daniel would have eaten it. Daniel was wise enough to say, no, just give us a test. Let's put God back in the environment and see how God comes out. I really think that in our nation, we need to beg for a test to say, let's put God back in our environment and see how God turns out. God's going to show up and be okay. When everything changes, God doesn't. When time is filled with swift transition, God is in charge of time. Whom shall I fear? God is in charge. Daniel says, I'm not going to fear anything. I'm not going to be upset about anything else. What disciplines can you employ to help keep you centered in an ever-changing world? Now, that is something that's different than it was when I was a kid. Most of my teachers believed in God. Most of them supported Scripture. Maybe yours do, maybe they don't. But there are some disciplines that you can involve yourself in. It may be about fasting and prayer. It's going to be about worship. Worship is a great spiritual discipline. It's going to be about being together with God's people. Our Wednesday night crowd ought to go through the roof when our kids go to school because they're going to need that Christian support in the middle of the week to say, no, there's a place where things are different. There's a place where I have support and comfort. Home life, moms and dads, you've got to make sure that home is the stable place where your children know whatever happens to me there, I'm okay here. I'm safe when I get home. I'm loved when I get home. No matter what happens in my environment, there are some disciplines that you can have. Read your Bible. Fast and pray. Celebrate God in your life. Pray for guidance. Look for God's will. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they find themselves doing that. And as they apply themselves to finding God, God applies Himself to advancing them. Their cause is advanced because they choose God. They're in it, but not of it. What if they'd gone and become good Babylonians? God wouldn't need them. He didn't need more Babylonians. He needed someone to go get Babylon ready for the Jews to come, and someone to get Babylon ready to help take care of His people when they got there. And eventually He's going to send Ezekiel along. And He makes Jeremiah stay at home and keep saying, see, I told you. I told you. I'm going to keep preaching. The message is not going to change. Wherever you are in your school, in your job, who moved my temple? God's the one that upset their world. And God's the one that said, even in our upset, I will never leave you nor forsake you. We live in a postmodern, worldly environment. God says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still on my throne, and I'm waiting for you to come home. A lot of baptisms the last few weeks. Maybe that's turned your mind to thinking about having your sins washed away. What a beautiful image. They've got some decorations up, but I'm told that they can be split easily so we can see a baptism. If someone needs to come to Christ today, we long for you to put your life in His hand, to bring your life to Christ, to allow Him to transform you and change you. Maybe you just need to be reminded to be a friend to those Christian friends you have at school. Don't go to school and act like you don't know each other. At least give each other a head nod going down the hall. You don't have to be buddies, but yeah, there's something different between you and me. We may not run the same circles at school, but you and I have something that no one else here has. Well, that can be a great comfort on that day when you're struggling to be in a new environment. Some of you seniors look down at freshmen and just give them a head nod. I know everybody else is on you, and I can't really be buddy-buddy with you. It won't help you. It won't help me. But I can give you a head nod and say, I see you and I care about you. We need to be doing that for one another. Maybe you need to confess that you are of the world and not just simply trying to be in the world for God. If you've embraced worldliness, repent of that. Bring your life to God. Become one that's in the world, but not of it. As together we stand and sing.